Hello, good morning to some and good afternoon to others. My name is Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr., and I am the president of the Liberation Movement, Inc., and this is Saturday Soul. The focus and mission of the Liberation Movement is to provide services to individuals who are liberated or seek to be liberated psychologically, spiritually, or socially through educational initiatives. And today we're going to focus in on the psychological. Many of us have all of us have gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, and life has changed tremendously for all of us. And with that, a lot of us are adjusting to life now after the pandemic is starting to wane. And we have a special guest with us here today that is going to talk us through ways in which we can heal from some of the trauma that we've experienced via COVID-19, but also the anti-Blackness that has impacted our community across the diaspora. With that, if you're here, put your name in the chat and where you're watching from. We want to shout you out. I'll be looking here on the screen. And with that, what we'll do is transition to our video that will discuss the model that frames all the work we engage in, which is the Black transformation model.
The work of the Liberation Movement is grounded in the Black transformation model. We believe that there is a 5-step process that will lead to the advancement of our people. These steps inform all work that we engage in. The first step is decolonization, which we define as the holistic process of letting go of colonial practices, values, and culture, adopting and returning to indigenous ways of knowing and being. In other words, a change of mindset centering African ways of thinking and living. The second step is abolition. We define abolition as being willing to fight injustice and dismantle practices, systems, institutions, and power structures. The third step is revolution. I define revolution as a fundamental change from the status quo that facilitates new ways of knowing, being, and operating. The fourth step is liberation. To be liberated is to be free from forms of spiritual, psychological, and physical oppression and captivity. The last step is sovereignty. When we say sovereignty, we are stating that we will be committed to supporting and/or establishing Black-owned and operated institutions. So, we take seriously Romans chapter 12, verse 2, where it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Black transformation is our assignment, and we are committed to help liberate our people spiritually, socially, and psychologically through educational initiatives.
So with that, we're so glad that we had Judith from Boston here with us and Jessica from Michigan. We're so glad that you've taken time to be with us on today. So now I want to just jump into introducing you to our guest. Dr. D is a licensed clinical psychologist and mother of 4 who is passionate about seeing brokenness restored. She is an author and international speaker who earned her doctorate in clinical neuropsychology, which she uses to help trauma survivors and those who are experiencing relational distress. She has served her community for the past 20 years through psychotherapy, hosting healing conferences, training organizations on abuse prevention and response, and leading uplifting support groups. Dr. D is currently writing her memoir in the form of a guidebook to help those who are hurting learn to reclaim their stories and live with freedom. And you can connect with her on all social media via her handle at Dr. D Knight. It is a pleasure to have Dr. D on with us.
I am so happy to be joining you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, thank you. I know last year we were trying to get you on, but I think this is just the perfect time for us to have this discussion as people are trying to figure out coming out of the pandemic. We're calling it the endemic phase of this situation, and trying to kind of adjust to life at this time. Uh, there are many like myself who lost loved ones during this period and are still trying to figure out things. So I thought you would be the perfect person uh to talk with and talk with our audience about how to navigate some of those things. So thank you so much for your willingness to be with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so could you just from your own background and your own things that you've observed, how has anti-blackness coupled with the pandemic impacted the Black community here in the United States?
Yeah. So first, I guess we might need to discuss what is anti-blackness, and
Yeah.
your regular audience members might already know, but you're asking how does a systemic issue that devalues the humanity of Black people, right?
Mm,
How does that, coupled with this worldwide experience of loss, right, with the
yeah.
pandemic, and not just loss, but fear and perhaps lack of information and misinformation, and those are like that is almost the basis of any traumatic situation, is that you don't have all the information available to you. You don't
Yeah.
know how long it's going to last. You don't know who all is going to be impacted or how impacted you will be, right? You don't know if you're going to get long COVID if you get COVID. You don't know if you're going to get COVID if you travel, right? So how does one form of trauma coupled with another form of trauma
Mm,
impact a group of people a lot, right? We're talking about a complexity to the trauma. So it's not just one level, it's not just one layer. Now we have some complex trauma that people are experiencing. So yeah, we're asking, how do multiple traumas impact people?
yeah.
And people are not generally supposed to experience multiple traumas throughout their lifespan.
Yeah. And with that, h- how have what have been some of the ways in which you've seen individuals cope with these traumas?
Yeah. So not every coping skill is adaptive, is
Mm,
something that we want to hold on to. And sometimes our coping skills are adaptive for the time period, right? But we don't want to continue with them. So a coping skill that I had for the pandemic was that I stopped listening to the news. I stopped watching the
mm,
news. That was not to put my head in the sand, but I felt like my husband at the time was watching enough of it. He called it his nightly dose of terror. I think
yeah.
that was a way of setting a little bit of a boundary around it, that he would just spend a little time watching it. I decided whatever was important, he would relay to me. And so I would be okay without filling my mind with that. And the same thing goes for the anti-Black institutions throughout our world. I can't even say throughout the nation, throughout the world. Anti-Black racism exists everywhere. And so we don't have to ingest every bit of trauma. We don't have to ingest every bit of harm that we see happening in order to be abreast of what's going on, in order to at least have enough knowledge to take action in the way that we would like to. So that's one thing I have done. And that's a coping skill that might be temporary, because at some point I might need to watch the news just a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes we adapt and we change our coping skills, and we have to, so that we can protect our peace, so that we can protect our humanity, so that we can survive this thing. Rest is another coping strategy. We have to be intentional about that. I don't think that rest and relaxation and leisure just climbs into our laps and sits there. We have to pursue it intentionally. And so that's another coping strategy, to be intentional about rest. And so I think that there are lots of different strategies that we can use. I don't know if they're always adaptive or if they're always long term, but we can switch them out and we can try lots of different pathways. Of course, there's therapy. I will always promote therapy.
Mhm.
It's an
Yeah.
occupational thing. But absolutely therapy, getting together in community,
Yeah.
meeting together, even with groups like this, even if it's online. What we found is that, because of this pandemic, we've poured a lot more into researching how effective virtual therapy is, how effective meeting virtually with others is. And it turns out that virtual therapy is as effective for creating outcomes, positive outcomes,
Mhm.
as in-person therapy, right? So I'm just going to extrapolate and assume that also getting together, meeting together in groups online, joining together in communities online will also be helpful for our mental health.
I think you said something that's really important as it when you're talking about getting into groups and finding ways in which to interact um, with different people because um, coming out of this pandemic, I've heard language like we're in a pandemic of loneliness. There are a lot of people who are coming out of this time period feeling a sense of loneliness, particularly Black men are are experiencing that. Have you seen that in your work and if so, are there ways in which, in addition to some of the things that you just shared, specifically for Black men, that we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, so a few things. One, even before the pandemic, we had what some clinicians and researchers would call an epidemic of loneliness.
Mm,
That loneliness is, and we know that loneliness is not simply being alone. You can be alone and be in solitude and enjoy your solitude, but you can be alone and feel lonely. And that's not an enjoyable experience. It's usually not a pleasurable experience, right? So when someone feels lonely, they could be in a crowd of people and still feel like they are not connecting well with others. So let's just, I just wanted to talk about, well, what does loneliness even look like?
mhm.
And how long has it persisted? It's already been a problem prior to the pandemic. And I do think that the pandemic has exacerbated that. And you're saying specifically, even for Black men who oftentimes uh, are not, at least traditionally, we don't discuss men getting together in groups and having discussions about their feelings, and those are wonderful things, and I want them to, and I hope that they do, and I hope that more men do get together and attend to the heart work that we often skip over in their upbringing, when we tell them, toughen up, oh, you're a big boy, you don't, that
Yeah.
didn't hurt, you don't have to cry, right? We give these messages and then we wonder, well, how come they're not connecting emotionally? And I actually saw a gentleman saying this past week, I don't know if it was this week that he said it, but I saw it this past week, where he was saying, if you are a woman, and we're talking about a woman in a heterosexual relationship with a man, if you are a woman in a relationship with a man and you have never had an emotionally connected man, whether it's your father is not emotionally connected, your previous boyfriends were not emotionally connected, you need to step aside and question yourself whether or
Mm,
not you are capable of handling a man who is emotionally connected. Because when
yes.
I get into a relationship, I'm going to be emotionally connected, right? And then are you prepared to deal with the emotions that you want so badly? You want me to be emotionally connected and express myself and share, but then it's problematic when what I'm expressing isn't what you expected or what you desired or what you want me to do. And so I think that, and again, I hate to sound like a broken record already, but going to therapy and starting to unravel perhaps our own ideas of what it should look like to be in a relationship with someone who's emotionally connected, of what it looks like to be an emotionally connected man, right? Unraveling some of our ideas about those things, especially if we've never seen it modeled. And for Black men, if you've never seen it modeled, what does that look like? Otherwise, they're just terms. They're just things that we're saying emotionally connected, but what does that even mean, right? Are we examining our relationship patterns? Are we stopping to examine, how we impact others, whether or not we're doing things for performance, which that we get kind of naturally, right? I mean, when people talk about people pleasing, I always kind of, smile because That's a normal thing. What we get from the time a baby is born. We're like, oh, look at it. It's smiling. The baby's smiling. She's smiling. That baby's not smiling. The baby has gas. The baby doesn't know what a smile is. The baby just came out yesterday. It doesn't know what a smile is. You try to get the baby to smile and clap for the baby when it smiles. And then you clap for the baby when it stands and when it walks and when it crawls and all of these different stages. And that's good. If you had a healthy upbringing, you experienced praise and applause for doing good things. That's natural and that's normal. So we get our people pleasing very naturally. But then sometimes if we don't also recognize our worth, right, outside of people pleasing, outside of what we can do and what we can produce, quite often our productivity is very linked to our self-worth. And if we're not as productive as we think we should be, and we're living in a society that limits our productivity, right, because we're Black, then perhaps we start thinking that we're not worth as much, that our presence isn't even worth as much. And so we have to think about all of those factors that impact, especially Black men. And all of that has to be unraveled. It doesn't just get unraveled by sitting across someone at dinner, by going out to the movies, by just going on a date, right? That's not how it gets unraveled. It gets unraveled by pausing to consider all of those systems that impact you and the strategies you perhaps have to do or to employ to be able to combat those things.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about a conversation that I had with one of my good friends from high school. And I was sharing with him some of the ways in which I was trying to cope in this new world that we're in. And one of the things that he shared with me, he said, based on what you're saying, I think you need to probably spend more time with your family. You need to spend more time being intentional with spending time with your friends, your close friends. And so before, I'm a professor, so before the school year started, most of my friends are on different coasts. So I flew out to California to get up with one friend, and I just stayed with them for a few days, got a hotel room near, but that was my investment in that, right? And as I think about it, are there things that you may have seen in your practice that particularly relate to women, Black women, and their trying to cope with some of the experiences that they're having coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, so I will say not just in my practice, but I am involved in a few groups online as well. And a lot of the experiences that I see a lot of women talking about are friendships and developing of friendships in adulthood, because the childhood friendships do not always last. And I think that that is a normal and natural part of human beings maturing and maybe moving in different directions. That doesn't have to mean that anyone was a villain, anyone did anything bad or shady. It's just a normal process of we grow and we grow apart and we grow in different directions and we have different ideas and we have different perhaps life purposes, and that's an okay thing, right? But what I often will see is women saying that they don't have any close friendships. And I'm quite sure that a lot of men say this as well, but I'm talking about groups of women that I am in, Black women, who will say they're trying to develop friendships. They like to travel and they like to enjoy themselves and have fun, but they don't know how to develop friendships in adulthood, because so often people are either have some type of agenda. They're trying to see if you could hook them up in some way. It's not really just based on actual friendship, camaraderie, caring for each other and each other's goals and rooting for someone else, right? So that is one of the issues that I see, and it very much links to some of the other things we've discussed already, right? The loneliness, the how do we stay in community? How do we, what do we consider community, right? Because just because I go to work with you and I see you and we key at work doesn't mean you're my community, right? And so I think that those are some of the issues that women are experiencing as far as loneliness and friendship and just life relationships and connecting, because we are so wired to connect as human beings. And if we do not have that, then do we have the basis for community? Do we have the basis for feeling like when life is pressing me in, I have a space that I can go to deal with these issues. And it has to be a space outside of just therapy. Therapy is wonderful,
Mhm.
but we're talking about 1 hour out of, like, 24 times 7, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to develop a sense of connection with others if we're really going to thrive. At least one other person.
Definitely. Um, I think about what you're saying, and as uh, people of faith, right? We often have historically de- gone to church to be a place of release, a place of support. And during the pandemic, a lot of us have gone online. Um, and so, could you speak to the role of faith and so just speak to the role of faith in addressing some of these challenges.
Yeah. So for people who have a connection already to a community, and then they just started, viewing things online, perhaps, or participating online because of the pandemic, a lot of people have gone back to in-person settings, but some people have not. Some people, have still stayed in the online setting. And in fact, I think that, and this is me thinking, right? This is
Uh-huh.
not, I looked at research and this is what it says. My thoughts about the people who have not gone back is that they do not feel like they were getting anything more in person than they're getting by viewing things online, or
Uh,
perhaps participating online. And I think that we ought not condemn those individuals, but we
mhm.
should look at it as perhaps an indictment on the church and whether or not the church was actually functioning in the way that the church was supposed to be functioning in the first place, right? So I see people sometimes, asking, and it's oftentimes people in church leadership who are
Yeah.
asking, how do we get people to come back to church? Or who are saying, y'all folks know that y'all are out at the restaurant and y'all are out at the
Yeah.
club and y'all
Yep.
ain't coming back
Yep.
to church. Let me tell you something. People can find friendship out at the restaurant, and they're
Mhm.
enjoying themselves in camaraderie with others out at the restaurant. People are enjoying themselves with it, immersed in a culture and a community when they're out at the club. We can't
Mhm.
deny those things. The reality is people are going to get filled where they can. And
Right.
if your organization is not providing a space that fills people, they will get filled somewhere else. We can't demonize people for getting filled somewhere else. We need
Mhm.
to step back and look at, okay, what are we doing to provide community? What are we doing to make a space where people are interested in participating in whatever way we're wanting them to participate? I can tell you that for myself, I was ruined for church as usual.
Yeah.
The go there and say hi, and hi, how are you doing? Have a good day, and smiling while you come in broken and you leave broken, but you got a smile on your face and you look cute. I was ruined for that. Looking at the program and just sitting in a pew that's facing the altar and repeating a few things. I was ruined for that by participating in programs where we got together and we shared what our week was like, and we shared what our experiences were like, our highs and our lows and our disappointments, even in God, right? In ways that we felt like God came through, in ways where we felt like God left us, in the dust, right?
Yeah.
And we got together and we shared those things and we prayed over those things, and we actually formed a community of caring for one another. And I don't think there's anything that can substitute caring for people, loving people, being connected to the people that are in your community. I don't think anything can substitute that. So as we are trying to employ faith as an option for working through the pandemic, we have to think to ourselves, do we even care for folks, or do we have an ulterior motive? Do we want more people in the pews to give more money to our cause, right? But if you don't have caring for people as your motive, people can recognize that, and why should they participate with your organization? And yes, I hope people do, others, do participate as well.
Yeah, so we want to encourage you guys. If you have questions, please put it in the chat. We want to make sure that Dr. D has the opportunity to answer your questions. We're glad that Don is here from New York and Chris is here from North Carolina. Thank you for being with us. And Marcus Stanley, thank you for viewing here with us. as I think about some of the challenges. Jessica says here, I'm online because I haven't found a physical location to meet my spiritual needs. Um, from your perspective, you said that there people can find spiritual nourishment in different environments. Could you talk a little bit more about that, ways in which uh individuals can do that? Because I know, for instance, our platform, one of the things that we've been in communication with our team about is not necessarily being a proselytization tool, but also still being open to being spiritual and sharing faith. So could you talk about ways in which the options that other options that people can seek kind of support uh, through this time?
Okay, other options for seeking support. Help me understand the question just really quickly.
Yeah.
To clarify.
So as we were talking about spirituality, a lot of times there was a traditional church that people would go to, but you also mentioned that people are finding spiritual nourishment in other ways. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, and I can tell you mostly from observation
Mm-hmm.
that something that I think we can sometimes neglect as far as what can feel spiritually nourishing is service. And so, what Jessica said is not uncommon. A lot of people talk about not feeling spiritually nourished or spiritually fed at whatever space they have been previously, and that they're looking for that. And there's nothing wrong with looking for that. I think that there are some, again, there are some spiritual leaders who will probably say, well, you shouldn't be worrying about trying to be filled. You should be trying to fill others. Okay, but aren't those people worrying about trying to be filled? At some point, we have to be replenished. At some point, we have to refill our own spiritual cup if we're supposed to be pouring from it, right? And so, where are we going to get replenished, and how are we getting replenished? And sometimes that is within the act of pouring out that we start to also feel refilled, right? Because if you have a cup and you filled it to the brim, and now it's ready to pour out, if you're not pouring anything out of it, it's only going to absorb so much. And so now that you've absorbed and you've absorbed and you've absorbed, where are you pouring out? In what way are you using your spiritual gifts, right? Because just like you have spiritual needs, you also have spiritual gifts. And so if you are not pouring those things out, you're going to stay at that same plateau. You're never going to get any more full. You're never going to get any more empty. You're just going to stay at this plateau that feels unfulfilling. And so, one of the things that I suggest is getting in a community where you can serve others, whatever that looks like. Whatever that looks like, in a way that you feel like you were called. And that's something else that what Jessica hits on, where she says, I'm not getting my spiritual nourishment in the way that I need it, right? And there's nothing wrong with having needs and needing things in a specific way, but a lot of people do not know what their needs are. They just know that it ain't happening. They just know that, I don't know, this thing ain't right for me. I know that, right? So a lot of times we will know what we don't like, but we haven't really keyed into what we do like. So I think taking some inventory of what is it I actually need, what is it I actually am looking for, right? That way I can look for those things. But if it's always, no, I didn't like that service, or no, they seem too pushy, or no, like I don't like, that's wonderful to know. But what are the things that you do like? What are the things that you do enjoy? And the way that we find that out is by actively pursuing them and actively doing those things, right? How did I know that, the deaconess board wasn't for me? I tried to be a deaconess. I tried to you try different things, right? That's how you find out. I often tell people, like with my degree even, don't do what I did. However, maybe do what I did, because I started out as a nursing major. ER was popular at the time, back in like 1998. Okay, that's like Grey's Anatomy nowadays for those who don't know what ER is. And so I started out as a nursing major, and I realized I don't really like that. And then I went on to be an English major. I love English and poetry, and then I was just like, I can only handle so much Elizabeth Barrett Browning and these different poets. I can only handle so much of that. And then I stopped and I thought to myself, what is the area that I'm performing the best while putting forth the least effort?
Hmm.
And that might sound like a little bit of a lazy way of thinking through things, but the reality is we probably do well naturally at those things that we are purposed for and those things that we are designed to do, those things that we like to do. Those things often do come naturally for us. So I wanted to know, what are the things that I'm doing well and I'm not even putting forth that much effort for it? Turned out it was psychology. I had at the time, I think, a B in psychology, and I wasn't going to class, which we weren't required to go to class. We were just required to know the information.
Hmm.
And so that means just from reading over the information and taking the test, I was doing pretty well. And so I decided psychology, and I got an undergrad in psychology, and I was just like, can't do much with this, so guess I should go get a master's degree. And during the course of my master's degree, when you delve a little deeper into the thing that is now of interest to you, you start seeing so many different pathways of how you can perhaps apply this thing. I want to apply that the same way for the church and for spirituality and for getting the nourishment you need and perhaps even pouring out in places that you are designed and called to pour out in. Start trying different things, and the things that you like, start delving a little deeper into those things, start serving a little more in those areas, start looking at the ways that you can pour out. I am called to be a healer. That looks like
Wow.
lots of different things. It looks like, sometimes it looks like writing, sometimes it looks like sitting on a podcast, sometimes
Hmm.
it looks like doing therapy, sometimes it looks like doing an assessment, sometimes it looks like just smiling at the person at the grocery store that's being rude to me. Right?
Hmm.
And I have to choose healing in all of those different spheres, right? And that
Hmm.
includes where my money is spent, that includes where my
Hmm.
time is spent, that includes where I nourish and replenish myself. Am I doing healing things for me? And that's what I've decided, is that everything in my life is going to be about healing. And so, same thing for you, Jessica, and others who you've spoken for. And I thank you for speaking up for other individuals who perhaps didn't speak up. Same thing. Start realizing or tuning into, what is my life about, and how can I pour myself out in those areas so that I feel fulfilled, regardless of what someone else is providing.
Yeah. As you talked about healing, it made me think about our Black youth and how the pandemic and them seeing not only the pandemic, them seeing these mass shootings happen, also seeing and experiencing anti-blackness in the classroom. Um, what what are some ways that parents and the community can be supportive of our young people as they are navigating a world in which is, and some might say, is a little tougher than what we had to go through?
Yeah. So asking questions even of those who are in authority. In fact, I shouldn't say even, I should say especially of
Mhm.
those who are in authority. So when you talk about racism in the classroom, or dealing with anti-blackness, whether it's in the classroom for our K through 12 or for individuals who are in secondary education, I think that asking questions of the individuals who are teaching is so important. How do you intend to address racism? How do you intend to address the experiences of my Black child in your mostly white classroom? Right? Because I want the people who are educating my children to be intentional about that. I want the people that my children are spending most of their waking hours under their care, right, to be intentional about that, because I'm intentional about it at my home. And I need others to be intentional about it as well, because again, it's not going to happen by accident. It's not just going to crawl up into their laps and they're going to be fair and they're going to be equitable and they're going to make sure that they're being intentional about things if they're not being very serious about having a plan for that. So I think asking questions, sometimes we might think that it's rude, or we think that we shouldn't ask a question, or we think that we shouldn't correct certain things. A friend really helped set me straight on this years ago. There was a viral, video, not video. I don't think it was video. I think it was a picture of a
Mhm.
little boy's assignment where he had said to the teacher something to the effect of like, stop teaching us lies about slavery or what have you,
Yeah.
whatever he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I love it. I said, I wouldn't want my kid to be rude though, but I absolutely love it. And a friend was like, is it not rude to teach the children lies? And I
No.
was like,
Yeah.
you're right. Why should we have to play nice in the face of the rudeness of teaching my child lies about Black people and about America and about how America has treated Black people?
Mhm.
I shouldn't have to play nice about that. And it's actually not rude to address it and say, stop teaching me lies. Like, you were teaching lies and therefore he addressed it. That's actually not rude. That's addressing the problem head on. And more of us, I think, need to take that stance that I'm simply addressing the problem head on. And it doesn't matter if people don't like the way that I'm addressing it. Quite often, people are not going to like the way that you address the wrongdoing. They don't like the fact that you're addressing wrongdoing. And therefore, there will be some nitpick about the way that you're addressing it. And one thing I refuse to do is to conform to other people's opinions about how I should address wrong, how I should address evil, how I should address unrighteousness and wickedness I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to conform to addressing trauma in the way that you, the traumatizing person, wants me to address it. I will address it however I believe needs to be addressed for my wholeness and healing and the healing of my community.
So with that, um sometimes we know that something's not right with one of our friends or family members. They're just not okay. Um, what steps should someone take if they know that a friend or loved one is not okay?
Yeah. We might want to kind of delineate like not okay in what way, but I'm assuming that you
Yeah,
mean as far as their mental health.
I'm
They feel
saying
like
mental health.
something's
That's
off.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm meaning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something's off with their mental health, and you don't know what to do or what to say. You don't want to be offensive. You don't want to run your friend off. You don't want to seem like you're not being supportive or like you're being judgmental, right? So all of those things I think go through our
All of
heads
those
when
things.
something like that happens, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I think we undervalue is asking permission to speak
Mm.
into someone's life, asking permission to and join them on whatever journey they're on with whatever struggle they might be having. But I think that that helps give power and control over to the person in a way that we ought to. We
Wow.
like, because the reality is it's not my life. It is their life. At the end of the day, no matter how good a friend they are, it's their life and they get to live their life however they choose to. If you were talking about an adult, right?
Mhm.
They get to live their life however they choose to. So, one of the things that I will often do is ask whether or not I even have permission to either speak about a topic with them or to address an issue with them, or if they don't even want to hear my opinion about it. And sometimes the answer is, I'll let you know. And it's like, okay, now I have not wasted my time. I have not wasted my energy trying to get this person to see how they're messing up in this area or that, or how they could do better in this area or that other. They don't have to get offended that I didn't ask you for that opinion, or here you are judging me when I didn't ask you to judge me, right? But if they say, well, sure, you have something that you have noticed about me that you want to share with me, right? So, I mean, this is just an example, right, of how you can speak into someone's life in a loving and kind way and actually have their buy-in for it, right? So, like, Dr. Freeman, I've kind of noticed something about you, and I'm not sure if I want to speak on it because I don't want to ruin our friendship or something, but I also want to give you the space that if you don't want to hear anything right now, maybe you're having a tough time and you don't feel like hearing anything from me, which is fine, right?
Mhm.
So that's one thing. I'm giving you the option of saying no. That gives you the power to invite me into that space or to be like, no, I'm going through some stuff. I'll be all right, right? And we have to respect that. We
Yeah.
need to respect people's opinions about what they want for their own lives. And then also have some humility when you're entering this space, right?
Mhm.
Because the reality is, no matter how much you know a person, you don't know everything that's going on with them. You
Yeah.
don't know everything that's going on internally. You don't know what things they've been thinking through on their own or with their therapist, or what things they have shared with you versus the things that they keep to themselves, right? All of us have a private life that we have not shared with everyone, or that we have not shared, we don't share it with everyone, right? And so have some humility and say, like, this is just from my perspective or what I'm noticing. I'm not saying that I'm right about it. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that it's the only way of acknowledging things. I'm simply saying this is my way of looking at things, and I could be wrong. So acknowledge that you could be wrong even about what it is you're saying. And I am so sorry. I thought that I was quite prepared for this, but I have to look for my cord. I'm so sorry. Just
No,
everything got
no,
dark. And so, okay,
no,
I
you're
found it already. Yes. Sorry.
you are fine. We have a question from Linda. She asks, what are your thoughts about solely pointing to resiliency as the solution for navigating trauma?"
I am so sorry that I was reading something on the screen and then realized it was not what you were reading out loud. And so, can you say
Yeah.
that again?
So, what are your thoughts about solely pointing to resiliency as the solution for navigating trauma?
So, I made a statement on Twitter. I don't know if it was last year or the year before that. It's a statement that went viral on Twitter where I said something to the effect of stop calling people resilient without calling out the systems that force them to be resilient or die.
Oh yeah. Mm.
The only option is either I'm going to be resilient or I'm going to crumple up and die. Like those are the only options I have. Please do not applaud that. I do not want to be backed into the corner of either be resilient or you will perish.
Right.
So I do not like the idea of pointing to just resiliency as a solution for navigating trauma. Perhaps we are able to employ strategies for navigating trauma because of our resilience, but I do not want our resilience to be the solution for navigating trauma. For one, I don't want us to be experiencing ongoing traumas, but there are some ongoing traumas, like anti-Black racism, that
Mhm.
we cannot resolve completely, and therefore we have to do some type of maintaining work, right? But the
Mhm.
maintenance work is not simply to rely on the fact that I'll bounce back.
Yeah.
It's not simply to rely on the fact that, oh, well, I have some resilience about me. I have some thick skin. I can bounce back from things. That is not enough. We have to employ some strategies that combat the effects of the trauma we are experiencing. And one of the, and I'll just pause for a second and describe even very quickly what I call trauma. So
Hmm.
for my own definition of trauma, I think that trauma is anytime you have an insult or an experience where you do not have enough healing for the harm that is being caused.
Hmm.
That's healing that's readily available.
Right.
So the example that I can use is when you prick your finger for your iron or for your blood sugar, and it's just a little pinprick. The healing is usually readily available. You bleed a little bit, it hurts a little bit, but a few seconds later, you're no longer bleeding, it's no longer hurting. I would not call that necessarily a large scale trauma. Maybe you had a little bit of a trauma right there, right? But when I was buying a few of these little pandemic gadgets for my kitchen because I thought I
Mhm.
was going to cook so much more, I slammed my hand down on one of the blades and it cut my knuckle down to the bone.
Oof.
And that has caused me to have, I believe, some post-traumatic arthritis. My finger
Mhm.
now clicks every time I do this. I can't close it all the way on a jar when I'm trying to close a jar. It took a long time to heal. The healing was not readily, immediately available. I would say that that was a larger trauma that I experienced right there. I
Mhm.
cannot simply count on the fact that, oh, well, I have white blood cells. It'll heal up. It'll be fine. Oh, well, I have an immune system. I won't get an infection. No, I have to actually employ some other strategies. I had to bandage it. I had to baby it. I had to make sure that it had a chance to heal. I had to rest my hand to some degree, right? So we
Mhm.
have to employ some strategies and not just count on the fact that, oh, well, I have an immune system. Oh, well, I have some white blood cells. Oh, well, I have some resiliency about me. My people have lasted this long. I'll last as well. Absolutely not. We
Yeah.
need to address the trauma that we've experienced. And quite honestly, even if you have the small pinprick, the doctor will usually put a band-aid on that,
Yeah.
right? So even for the things that seem like small T traumas, we still have to address them in some way. Otherwise, we'll end up, and honestly, people who have diabetes end up having issues with their feeling in the fingertips, right? Because of all those small traumas, all those small pinpricks over and over and over again. And those things do impact us.
Yeah. There's so it sounds like the microaggressions that they talk about. So I'm thankful that Shireen and Bill Morgan are with us. I'm going to ask this last question. what are some resources that may be helpful for our audience as they attempt to heal?
Yeah. So I talked about therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy. Therapy for Black girls is an excellent site. One of the things that I think is so important about therapy for Black girls is, and I sometimes will refer men to that site as well if they cannot find someone in their area, at therapyforblackmen.org. That is also a site where you can search for clinicians. The whole idea is these are clinicians who have been intentional about saying, listen, I provide therapy for people who look like you, so that I am coming from a lens of acknowledging the anti-Black racism. I'm coming from a lens of acknowledging the impact of white supremacy and privilege and all of these different things that impact you in your day-to-day life, right? I'm coming from that lens of acknowledging race as a factor in your experience. And so that's what I like about the site. And you can search it for people who are willing to have, and it's not just like the therapyforblackgirls.com is not just for women. There
Yeah.
are probably some clinicians who only see women, but most of those clinicians are going to see men and women. But the idea of them being on that site means that they have actually been intentional about recognizing the impact of anti-Black racism, and they want to support people who look like you. And so therapyforblackgirls.com, if we're talking about therapy, that's one of the things. Therapyforblackmen.org. The last I heard about Taraji P. Henson's foundation, I think it's
Yeah.
Boris, I can't remember. But if you look up Taraji P. Henson Foundation, I'm sure you'll find it. It says Boris something in the title. I believe that they offer vouchers sometimes for people to
Mm-hmm.
be able to get therapy services as well. So that's an option. Another thing that I tell people as far as therapy, ask whether or not the therapist you're interested in is accepting pro bono cases. If you feel like you're not able to afford it, or if they see people on a sliding scale, or if they can reduce the fees even from whatever the sliding scale might be, because sometimes people will, and sometimes they don't have any more slots for that, right? So if I'm already seeing 5 people pro bono, I might not be able to see more people pro bono because I have to pay my bills still. I have to turn the
Right.
lights on,
Yeah.
and so if no one else is providing any income to offset their care, then I perhaps can't add anyone else to my schedule at the time, right? The worst somebody could tell you is no. The worst
Yeah.
somebody could say is no, we can't do that. But I personally, before I became a professional in this area, meaning before I made good money in this area, I had to rely on people who were willing to see me pro bono. I had to rely on people who were willing to see me at a reduced fee, right? Because like when I was doing my internship, I was making $700 a month. I didn't have $100 a week to pay for therapy, right? And so ask people if they don't mind reducing it. That's just for therapy. We've only discussed therapy so
Yeah.
far, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting in community, like I said, and that is going to take feeling like you are risking something. Yes, it will. I want to acknowledge that it's not completely risk free, because you might try to engage with other people, and there might be somebody who has ulterior motives. I'm sorry to tell you that that's the reality of the world we live in. Oh, I see someone saying intentionality is very important. Yes, that's the reality of the world we live in, though, right? Is that we are putting something at risk whenever we are trying to connect with someone else. We have to expose a part of ourselves to some degree. But I encourage you to try to connect with others, connect with people who are like-minded, connect with people who are serving in the same area that you would like to serve in, connect with people who seem to have a similar purpose, whether it's healing or wholeness, or serving their community, educating their community, whatever it is that you feel like you are connecting with others on. Go a little deeper, spend a little more time, see what ways you can perhaps serve alongside them, or meet with others who are like-minded in those ways, and go to rallies, or go to churches, or go to soup kitchens, or whatever it might be, right? Find a way to connect with others, and that might be through service, that might be through meetings, it might be through meetups, which there's lots of Black groups that meet up together. So find a way to connect with others, because that is so vital. Another strategy is rest. I mentioned this briefly earlier. There's an author who said, and he does a lot of work with pastoral care. He said the number one indicator of longevity in ministry is rest. I would say that it's the number one indicator of longevity in anything is
Wow.
rest. how well we rest. We have so much research that shows us if you are not resting well, you are going to fail in many areas of your life. You
Wow.
have to get good rest. It is the bedrock of healthy living, is resting well. In fact, in our sleep, when we are sleeping, that's when our brain decides what are the connections I need to make. That's when we talk about neuroplasticity and um, uh, 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 the brain regeneration, and there's a word that I'm looking for and it's for some reason not coming to my mind despite my doctorate in
Mhm.
clinical neuropsychology. But when we talk about those things, neurogenesis, right?
Okay.
Talking about growing new brain cells and making new connections in new areas, that stuff happens when you're sleeping.
Wow.
It doesn't happen when you're awake and running around and when you're studying and you're looking through a book. That's not when you have neurogenesis. That's not when you have neuroplasticity. When we're talking about the brain bouncing back and that resilience,
Mhm.
resilience is a function of rest.
Wow.
So if you want to be resilient, you have to be intentional and serious about rest. Okay, so that's really important. That's not just frou stuff. That's not just
Yeah.
rest and make. No, that is research based. If you don't rest, you will not grow. You will not be resilient. You will not perhaps even accomplish half of the things that you are capable of accomplishing if you are well rested. So get your rest. It's very serious. And I would say be serious about joy as well.
Mm.
Everything can't be about a cause and productivity and posting it online and having a reel about it and making money off of it. You don't have to monetize all of your joy.
Mm.
Be intentional about joy. I'm personally in a season right now where I'm having to be very intentional about joy. And I actually was telling a friend this week that I'm looking forward to getting back to joy for joy's sake, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And as I'm getting back to joy for joy's sake, I'm just going to be intentional about joy because planned joy is also important. So planning and being intentional, again, there's that word, right? Intentional about scheduling joy, about scheduling play. That's another area that we start making more neural connections is when we're relaxed, when we can play, when we can
Mhm.
enjoy ourselves. That's when the brain is not so busy and because it's not so busy, now it can make the connections that it needs to make, those subconscious things that it perhaps couldn't do while you were actively working and actively, protesting and actively, right? Those things are wonderful,
Mhm.
but you have to rest. You have to have joy. You have to play. Those are things that are integral to the human experience. Okay, I hope that I've gone over a few things at least.
Oh no, that's awesome. And thank you, Elita and Pam, for being with us and your comments that you're adding to the discussion. So I'm sure there's people that just want to figure out how they can get in contact with you and the things that stay up with the things you're doing. How can people stay up with you?
Yes. So if you connect with me on drdknight.com, so that's www.drdknight, Dr. DEEKNIGHT.com. That is a wonderful way to connect with me because we are starting a bit of an online community, offline community. I say online, I'm sorry, I meant to say offline community where I am for right now. I am just sending out art and messages to people. I love doing it. It's very fun. I usually send about 15 things out at a time, and you can do whatever you want with it. There's instructions for what you can do with the art once you receive it. If you want to just take a picture of it and pass it on to someone else or what have you. But it's a way of helping people connect both with myself and with others around them. And so that is the whole idea: is getting connected with others, right? That gives you the room that you need to be able to have that rest. That gives you the inspiration, perhaps, that you need and the accountability that you need to actually have longevity on this journey that we're on. So connecting with me there is wonderful. Connecting with me on social media, connecting with others who are, again, when I say like-minded, everyone doesn't have to think exactly the same way as you.
Yeah.
But people who are serious about joy, people who are serious about
Yeah.
wholeness, people who are serious about healing and resilience and all of the things that we've discussed today, get in contact with people who are serious about those things, right? And that's what I provide. And then I also will start to send out messages. I just have not found a system as yet that is not going to spam people and is also going to send out messages in the way that I'm wanting to. So I want to send out some messages of encouragement just once a week to people, something brief, maybe longer than a text, but shorter than an email, that will just be encouraging and perhaps provide us an opportunity to reflect some of the things that I discussed today, reflecting on our own experiences and how that impacts us going forward.
Dr. D, we thank you so much for taking the time to inform our community on ways in which we can heal, given some of the traumas that we've experienced. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. And to the audience, thank you so much for being with us and supporting us. For us to continue to provide this type of programming, we ask that you support us via Cash App, Venmo. There's different ways in which you can do that, but we want to continue to bring high quality programming to you to empower you psychologically, socially, and spiritually. So with that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Dr. D, were you wanting to say something?
No, I was just going to say thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much. Have a great one, everyone.
I am the Liberation Movement.
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 I am the Liberation Movement. My name is Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr., and I am the Executive Director and founder of the Liberation Movement, which is a 501c3 organization that works with those who are liberated and seek to be liberated psychologically, socially, and spiritually through educational initiatives. To continue to provide the high quality programming such as Saturday Soul, we need your support. Your consistent monthly investment in the movement will allow us to continue to expand on the excellent work that is already started, such as decolonizing the Black mind curriculum that is already in development. So your gifts of any size via Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal would be a blessing to the advancement of this ministry. Thank you in advance for supporting and joining the Liberation Movement.
Please remember to join Sydney, me, and our special guest today on Clubhouse at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time so we can dive deeper into today's topic. See you soon.